Hello, welcome back to another episode of the FGLI podcast. We are on episode 4, and in this episode, we will be sitting down with Kia Lor, who is a Penn GSE alum and the current Associate Director of the Greenfield Intercultural Center, or the GIC. Kia is a captivating storyteller and has many incredible anecdotes, so we will spend most of this discussion unpacking the complex emotions and thoughts that she experienced as she navigated the challenges of being FGLI from her strongly multicultural background. We learned a lot from our conversation with Kia, so please stay tuned and enjoy.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the next episode of the FGLI podcast. Today your hosts are Peter and William, and we are joined today by the incredible Kia from the GIC.
Thank you.
Welcome. Before we begin, do you want to give a quick introduction of yourself?
Yeah, my name is Kia, like the car. I use she, her pronouns. I work here at the Greenfield Intercultural Center as the Associate Director.
Awesome. And before we jump into the conversation and learning more about your FGLI experience, I see you have a lot of different plants around your room. Do you like taking care of plants? Are you an avid gardener, plant enthusiast?
Yes, so one of the things that you'll see when you come to the Greenfield Intercultural Center is lots of plants in my office. And one of the things that I offer over the summer for students is plant sitting. So if you have plants that you don't want to take home or you can't take home because you're on a plane, or if you don't want to sell it over the summer and you want to come back and still maintain your relationship with your plant, bring it over to the GIC. I'll water your plants.
Awesome.
So, to start off the interview, I wanted to ask you, how would you say your upbringing shaped the way you pursued college as a freshman?
Yeah, thank you, Will, for that question. So I grew up in Minnesota, of all places. My family's from Laos. So after the Vietnam War, my family had to flee from the war. So my mom and my dad are both from Laos. And then when the war in Vietnam ended in 1975 for the Americans, that's when the persecution started for the Hmong people. And so that's how my family ended up in Thailand. I was born in a refugee camp in Thailand, and then we relocated to Minnesota. So my upbringing was actually predominantly in Minnesota, where we first landed in the land of 10,000 lakes, and my mother, who has lived her whole life in the equator, had to come to Minnesota, where for the first time we couldn't wear flip-flops, and she had to figure out coats and boots, and we couldn't afford any of these things. So it became really clear to me or to my family that, okay, we are living in a different time. But I think as a child, I just thought my parents had all the answers to the world, right? Because when you're a kid, you're like, oh, my parents know everything. And my mom would always say, why is it snowing? Like, this is hell on earth. Like, I've never seen something like this. And as a child, I believed her. I'm like, yes, Mom, this is weird. Why does it snow? This is not supposed to happen, because my mom had never seen snow. And so as a kid, I just believed that. And then in third grade in science class, I learned that the earth is tilted at a 23.5 degree angle. And because of this tilt, we had the seasons, and that the seasons happen every year, and it's anticipated. That's when I figured out, wait, my mom doesn't have all the answers to the world. If she doesn't understand that the earth is tilted and this is why we have the seasons, what else doesn't she know? So I think at 9 years old, I kind of figured out that my mom didn't have all the answers to the world, and that I needed to find answers to the world outside of her. And I think that's really when it hit me that I needed to find mentors. I needed to find other people outside of my immigrant parent to figure out the world, because if she didn't know that, then what else wasn't she informed about?
That was beautifully said. Yeah. I can find myself almost relating to a lot of the experiences you had.
Yeah. I guess kind of building off of that, as you were like entering college and like learning like all of these different things, meeting new people, seeing different things, how would you say you grappled with that? Like what kind of thoughts you had, what kind of feelings were you feeling like during that time when you were, I guess, experiencing all of these new things and then comparing it back to your life like back home in Minnesota?
Yeah. So the idea of going to college never even was a conversation at home. We never talked about it because my mom never knew anything about going to college. And I remember there was a small community college or like a pre-professional college down the block from where I went, where I grew up. And my mom's like, well, why don't you just go there to the small community college down the block? And I'm like, no, Mom, I want to go somewhere bigger, somewhere further. And she was like, I don't understand why you would want to go anywhere else. Like, that's down the block. And so when I started applying for colleges, it was my junior year of high school. So it was, compared to most other students, that was really late in the game by the time I was a junior. And I'm like, oh, I should go to college. And luckily for the programs like the TRIO programs, the Upward Bound programs, I was highly involved in all of these different programs. And then a lot of my counselors and mentors had helped me to apply for many scholarships. Because as a first gen student, I was one of those students who loved school. I loved learning. I would stay after school for all the after school programs. During my free time, I would go to the public library because we didn't have a computer at home. So I would always go to the public library to use the internet. And whenever the hour time went off, then I would go home. And so I was always a very studious kid who liked books and liked reading. And so I knew that I wanted to go to college by the time I was junior, but I couldn't fathom how I would apply or afford it. So a lot of my high school counselors supported me through this because they also noticed that I was very book smart. I wanted to learn. So I applied to all of the different scholarships, and luckily, the Gates Millennium Scholars Program, I was part of that, where they give, they will pay for 6 years of your education, 4 years undergrad, 2 years graduate school, all paid, and you just need to show up to any of an American U.S. college or university. I got the Optimist Scholarship. I got the Beat the Odds Scholarship in order to go to college. And so when it was time to go to college, my mom's like, well, of course you should just go down the block. And I'm like, Mom, I have all these scholarships. They're going to pay for me to go anywhere in the world. So then I signed up to go to this small liberal arts school called the College of St. Benedict. I didn't realize that at the time, but it was a Catholic school. I didn't grow up in a Catholic faith or school at all. And it was 2 hours away from the Twin Cities in Minnesota. So I figured this is far enough. Like, I just want to go as far as I can. And 2 hours felt really far at the time. And and then I toured the college. I really liked it. My college admissions adored me. She really wanted me to go there. So she really went to bat for me. And I went to this small liberal arts school, 3,000 students, all girls. Right next door to us was St. John's University. It was all boys. The school was founded by nuns, and I went there. And it was such a huge culture shock for me as a first-gen student, because for the first time, I was moved out of my circle of my community. Because in high school, there were a lot of Hmong students, right? And so when I got to St. Ben's, where it was predominantly white, predominantly Catholic students. And I remember being a first year, and I'm like, wait, how come everyone know the Lord's Prayer? And they all recited, like, without any hesitation. I'm like, wait, did they all meet beforehand to talk about this? But I quickly realized that there was a huge cultural gap, that I had no idea how they all got this knowledge, and I didn't. Or even being the first person in class. I remember I walked into class, and I was the first person who had black hair. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Everybody was blonde. And that was very visible, like a very visible experience for me when I walked into the class. I'm like, well, everyone has blonde hair in this class, and I'm literally the only person with dark hair. Or being asked a lot about where I was from, and when I said I'm from St. Paul or Minneapolis, they would say, no, but like, where are you really from? And so I remember as an undergrad just having a lot of microaggressions around, like, where am I really from? Because the answer that they wanted was that I was an international student because I looked foreign, or because I didn't look, like the rest of my classmates. And what they really wanted to ask was, what's your ethnic identity? But instead they would always say, oh, where are you from? No, where are you really from? Because you didn't fit the narrative of what a person from Minnesota would look like. And a lot of those microaggressions like really transferred into my college experience as a minority student. And now working in higher ed, I get to help students better understand those experiences. I remember just being really upset about it as an undergrad, but then I started to learn that this was the training, this was the intercultural training that really helped me to build muscles around understanding, around inclusion, around understanding if somebody was malicious or that they were just completely like not knowledgeable about somebody from my background. But I remember my mom was like, why are you going to school so far? And why are you, like living on a college campus? You're paying a lot of money. But I do have a different story that I want to share. I remember one time when I was 18, right? When I was 18, my mom had gotten me a 1991 Toyota Camry. I don't know if you know what that car looks like, but it's a really old car, okay? And so that was like my first car. It was a beater car. And my mom had bought me this car so that I could drive her around because I'm first gen. We don't have a driver. She was tired of taking the bus or waiting for other people to drive us. So she had gotten me a car and I got my license at 18. And so I decided that I had heard about sleepovers, like on campus overnights. And I'm like, wait, you can do that? You can go to a college and talk to admissions and say, hey, can you host me for a night because I want to see if I like this campus. So I did an overnight at the College of St. Benedict when I was a senior in college. And my mom had specifically told me, my mom and my big brother had specifically told me, Kia, don't drive this car outside of the city limits because it's an old car. It's not going to make it like outside of the city. And I'm like, I'm going to test that out. And so I had talked to my admissions counselor at the College of St. Benedict. We had organized a weekend for me to do an overnight. So I drove 2 hours out of the cities to go to this overnight. One of my friends and I, my high school friends and I, drove all the way up there. And of course, it was January in Minnesota, so it's cold. We get up there and the snow's like frozen and the snow's up to our waist and we're driving up there in my 1991 Toyota Camry. We finally get to the college and we did an overnight. I had a great time. The last day that we were there, we woke up to start the car and it didn't start. The car had died because it was so cold and then the battery was so old. And so I'm like, oh no, what do I do? This is what my mom and my brother were telling me. And so finally, they got the security, campus security to come and jump my battery and jump my car. We were able to drive all the way up until we got to the interstate. And then my car died again because the battery had ran out. And so now we're stranded. And this was like 2008, 2009, where like smartphones weren't really a thing. And I'm like, oh no, now we're stranded. Do we walk back to the campus and have campus security jump my car again? It's a 2-hour drive back home. It's really far and I don't have communication with my family. Luckily, my friend had her little flip phone at the time. So I called my brother and my mom and I'm like, ugh, they're going to yell at me, but I wanted to go to college and I wanted to do a sleepover. So my brother, drives all the way up from the Twin Cities to come and we would drive the car. It would die. He would jump the car. We would drive again. It would die. He would jump the car. We did this for like 2 hours, y'all, to get back into the Twin Cities. And by the time we got home, I'm like, oh my goodness, my mom and my brother are gonna, they're gonna yell at me. And I was ready to just get an earful of them yelling at me. But when we finally got home and we're all settled, my brother and my mom were like, Kia, we're so sorry that we're so poor, that we couldn't give you a better car so that you can go to college. And I was like, oh, yay, they didn't yell at me. But I was also so heartbroken because they wanted me to do well. They wanted me to go to college. It wasn't the fact that I couldn't go. It was just we couldn't afford such an experience. And they couldn't afford a nicer car that would be able to drive me 2 hours north and 2 hours south without it dying every other mile, right? And so my mom wanted me to do well, but I think she just didn't know how to support me through that. And I think that college experience, or at least that sleepover, that overnight, really showed me that okay, they want me to do well, but they don't have the tools to help me get there. And so I'm going to need to find professors on campus. I'm going to need to find champions on campus who are going to fight for me and who are going to show up for me so that, when my parents can't be there, or my mom and my brother can't be there, I can ask for help from elsewhere.
I've also had similar experiences with my car having an old car. I remember there's this one time I was driving to school, and then it just turned off. Like, all the lights just turned off, and I was still driving. So I was confused as to what was going on. And then luckily I parked. As soon as I park, dead. So I know how that feels a little bit. So.
It's devastating.
It's horrible.
You feel like, oh no, I'm stuck in the middle of an island.
Yeah.
Actually wanted to ask you about like one specific moment, I guess, from college that was very pivotal in how you approached your professional life.
Oh, the most pivotal experience for me in college was studying abroad. So I went to India. I studied abroad in China and India because Bill Gates was paying for my education.
Okay.
So I'm like, okay, then let's experience what college is. And I remember it was so contested by my mom because she's like, but why would you go to a third world country and learn there? What do they have to teach you? Because I have brought you to America, to a country in which we have the best education system. Anybody in India and China would die to be in your place. So why would you go to these places to study, right? I brought you to America to be educated as a white person, as an American. And I was like, Mom, this is what white people do. They study abroad, right? They go to different parts of the world and they expand their worldview. They understand history, they understand language and religion and culture. So precisely, I am getting a white person's education by going abroad. And then when I told her I was going to India and China back to back, she was like, oh no, you dropped out of college. And I'm like, no, Mom, I'm not, dropping out of college. She's like, why are you vacationing? Like, why are you traveling and doing all this thing? And I'm like, Mom, Bill Gates is paying for it. And these study abroad experiences, because in Minnesota, where St. Ben's is, we're in the middle of the cornfields. We've been walking around and you can smell all the cow dung, right? So the question for all the folks on my campus was never, are you going to study abroad? It is, where are you going to study abroad? Because it was a very common thing on that campus. There were only 3,000 students and everybody wanted to go somewhere else because it was really boring on campus and it was cold. And so I chose India and China, and I specifically chose India because I'm like, where can I find on this planet that is the furthest away from home that I can go? Right? Because I think there was so much struggle as a kid growing up in poverty, growing up on government assistance, that I just wanted to expand my worldview. And I'm like, where is the furthest place I can go? I'm like, yes, India. That is exactly the other side of the planet from Minnesota. So I got there and I learned that my mom was a professional, like, clothes line person, like a professional fire starter. Right? And I'm like, oh, this is what my mom meant. Because I remember growing up in Minnesota, my mom's like, I'm so sorry, my child, that you have to grow up in a place so flat. Because in Laos and in Thailand, the mountains are beautiful and the waterfalls are so fresh, you could drink right out of the water. And there is so much beauty in the trees and the nature, and you could eat literally a fruit from the tree. And as a kid in Minnesota, I'm like, Mom, I don't understand it. I don't understand. I love the Mall of America. I love the Land 2000 Lakes. I love the Whoppers at Burger King. Like, I don't know why I would want to eat a fresh fruit from that tree. And so for the first time in Asia, I ate the fresh fruit from the tree and I drank the fresh waterfall and I got to see this beautiful part of the world that I'm like, it finally makes sense that my mom isn't this idiot or this stupid person who didn't have any cultural capital. My mom actually has this whole lived experience in Asia that I have been so misunderstood, like I've misunderstood her in so many ways, right? Because it goes back to that third grade self of me where I'm like, well, if my mom doesn't know that the earth is tilted at a 23.5 degree angle and we have the seasons, then she must be an idiot, right? That she doesn't have anything to contribute. And I think going abroad in college and going back to Asia really allowed me to realize, wow, my mom has all of this wealth of knowledge that I had never given her credit for. And that was really eye-opening for me as a first-gen student, was going back to Asia and recognizing that there was this whole world that she had lived through and had come from that in the United States I was not informed about. And I think that was such a transformative experience for me to come back home and to say sorry. Like, sorry, Mom, I didn't realize that you had this whole life before you came to the United States. And you had all of these skill sets that in the United States you became culturally handicapped. And that's when I also started to realize that my mom was one of my first intercultural teachers, right? She doesn't have a degree. She doesn't have, research under her belt, but she had taught me that there are multiple ways to see the world and that both can be true and both can be valid. And I think for me, growing up in the US as an immigrant child and as a first gen college student, I dismissed all of that knowledge as like irrelevant or that it was not useful. And as I do a lot of my professional work in the intercultural field, and especially working here at the Greenfield Intercultural Center, that's one of the things I try to help students build their muscles around is how do you understand that there are multiple worldviews and that there's no one singular paradigm of the world and that both worldviews can be true at the same time. So yeah, that's a little bit about my mom and my college experience.
I definitely resonate with your story a lot. Like in third grade, realizing that like, oh, my parents like don't know like XYZ. I remember when I think back to like elementary school, like second grade, third grade, I remember there being a point where I thought my mom and dad, this is like where they like can't help me anymore. Like they got me through like the basic like multiplication tables, but then when I was in third grade and we were like seeing like I guess like harder and harder problems or just like English or just like all of these other like topics like science, etc. They were just like, we can't help you anymore. And I felt both, I guess, like really sad that they couldn't help me. And I guess like a little like, I want to say like, not really like anger, but just maybe like a little resentment. Just realizing that like, oh, if all of these other kids' parents can do like XYZ, why can't like my parents like do the same thing? And then I also had a similar like revelation when I was just like watching my dad just fix all of these like old appliances that we like use back home because he gets them from like the salvage yard, old like microwaves, toaster ovens, etc. And he just like fixes them in his free time because he's like, well, if I can fix this for basically nothing, we're saving like hundreds of dollars on these like old appliances. And he doesn't have like a formal like engineering education, but at the same time he's like able to like figure like all of this stuff out. And I think that was when I was like, my dad is the smartest person I know, and he like doesn't have like a college degree. We were like sitting on an airplane once for like one of the first times, and I remember him being like, how is it that like an airplane flies? And he was like figuring it out like by himself. And just like,
What?
I was like,
So cool.
What is happening?
Oh,
How is he like saying like all of this? But I don't know. I really like resonated with that, and I think definitely like moving like forward, I've grown to have like a lot of appreciation for my parents' like cultural capital as well. But I guess I also was wondering what it was like for you like college or even now being split between like almost like two worlds, like your professional world at Penn at the GIC and maybe like your home still in like Minnesota. What is it like going like back and forth between those two worlds? How is it like navigating that and having conversations about that?
That's such a great question. When I'm at home, I'm a Hmong daughter to my mother. I don't bring associate director Kia home because they don't understand it. And then when I'm here, I put on my work hat, right? And I bring some of my Hmong cultural values here, but for the most part, I acculturate to the American like lifestyle. And so it does become one of the things that I've learned is that I need to be culturally competent in both, right? When I go home, I'm a Hmong daughter and I have to know how to cook. I have to know how to grill chicken. I have to know how to, rinse the green onion. I need to know how to make rice. So there's a lot of skill sets that I need to be able to do in order to be competent in that world. And yet at the same time, when I'm here at Penn, I need to know how to respond to emails in a professional way. I need to be able to deal with student, conflict. I need to be able to work collaboratively across campus. And they're not, two separate worlds. I think I've learned how to see the complementary skill sets and the similar values that underlay it. But there are things that I don't take back home. But I also realized this, Peter, is particularly during the pandemic, that my FGLI experience doesn't end just because I graduated from college, And And for some reason in my head at 18 to 22 years old, I just thought, oh, if I could go to college and graduate and make it and make money, my FGLI experience would be over, and I would be a part of it. And then I graduate and I'm like, wait, the FGLI experience doesn't just end because I graduated from college. And even throughout graduate programs, or even now, as a professional, it's still something that I deal with. The FGLI experience is always going to be a part of my journey and a part of who I am. And I recognize that very specifically when I went back home during the pandemic to be with my family. I realized, oh wow, we still have all the internet issues that, like, Wi-Fi wide. My mom doesn't have the bandwidth that I would need in order to Zoom into every call. And then now I have to negotiate and wrestle with that. Or, she's still living in poverty. And yes, I make enough money to send home. But at the end of the day, like, I can't change the circumstances of the fact that she doesn't speak English. She doesn't have a full-time job. And so now I realize I have more tools and more social capital and maybe some financial capital to alleviate some of my FGLI challenges. But for the most part, like, that experience still stays with us, right? I remember specifically when I graduated from undergrad and then wanting to, go to my master's program. And my mom's like, well, of course you should go to the University of Minnesota, because it was between the University of Minnesota or the University of Pennsylvania. She doesn't understand that Penn is an Ivy League institution. So she's like, yeah, of course you're going to go to the University of Minnesota so you could live with us. You could pay the bills. We could help you, with the rent. I'm like, no, Mom, I don't think you understand it's not that the University of Minnesota is not a great school, but that certain doors going to open for me if I went to a place like Penn versus a place like the U of M. And so when I decided to come to Penn, she was like, you don't love us. You just want to run away from home. You want to run away from all the responsibilities. And I'm like, no, Mom, this is about opportunities opening for me. And I remember after I graduated from Penn and then I went and, looked for work, she's like, well, of course you're going to look for work in Minnesota. And there were all of these doors that opened to me on the East Coast and were paying me so much more than they would have paid me in the Midwest. And she's like, oh, you purposely chose a school in the East Coast because you don't love us, because you don't want to come home. And I know that she's not trying to, make me feel bad or anything, but I think the values around family and the values around like collectivism and around being with people who look like you were so important for my mom that as a first-gen student, it was so hard for me to explain to her, Mom, these are professional decisions. There are doors, there are mentors, there are financial decisions that I have to make that will not bring me back home, particularly. And this was the world that you dreamed for me, was to come to the United States and to be able to achieve things that you weren't able to achieve. And so that may take me away from the Twin Cities for now. In order for me to build my professional development, in order for me to make enough money to also send home, and in order for me to have the social networks that I need to have in order to be able to move up in life.
Actually, I similarly went through that same exact scenario. I actually had to explain like everything about Ivy Leagues to my family. Myself in high school, same experience. Didn't even know I wanted to go to college, and then I was doing pretty good in school. So then the doors opened up for me, and I got a college advisor in really late in the college process, around November. So deadlines were literally right around the corner. And then she saw my resume, she saw all I was doing, and she was just like, you are capable of getting into these amazing institutions. And I was like, wait, what are these? And then I had to explain that to my mother. And then she's like, well, obviously you're going to the school that's right here, right? I'm just like, no, I kind of want to see if I can go maybe outside of New York, just because I think it's very important to like diversify your experiences in terms of where you go to school, where you grow up. I think there's a lot of things you can learn from these experiences. And so I actually wanted to ask you, what would you say is one piece of advice you would give fellow FGLI students in general, just like with what you know now?
Yeah, excellent question. I think one advice that I would give to current FGLI students now is to seek out your multipliers in your life. Because, I think as FGLI students, we won't have the type of social capital that a lot of our peers have. And one of the things I have learned is that there are around, I think it was a little book that I had read at one point, around there's 4 different types of people that you'll meet in your life. The adders, the subtractors, the multipliers, and the dividers, right? And so I think about it like that when I go to places like Penn, where I'm like, okay, who are going to be my adders and my multipliers, right? So adders are people, in the book, they talk about how adders are people who are like your family. They're like your best friends, right? If you want to get from floor 1 to floor 10, adders are staircase. They help you get to the next level. They will walk with you. They will be there for you every step of the way. And it's important to have adders. Multipliers, though, are people who, if you want to get from floor 1 to floor 10, they are elevators. They will get you from floor 1 to floor 10 like that, because they have social connections, because they're able to vouch for you behind closed doors. These are people who are going to write your letters of recommendation. These are people who are going to nominate you for awards when you show, good skills. These are people who are going to think of you when they have a job opening. And so I think about who are my adders in life and who are my multipliers at the institution that I go into or at the spaces that I encounter. So that would be my advice for students, is to look for your multipliers and your sponsors, but your multipliers, people who are going to multiply you and able to get you from floor 1 to floor 10 like that, because they recommend you. And of course, there's the subtractors and the dividers. Subtractors are people who, are going to take from you. Take time. They're going to take money from you. They're going to take your friend. They want to, copy off your classwork. They're going to want to, distract you. And these folks are, people who don't really have anything to add into your life. They just want to take time. And then the dividers are people who take from you, but they maliciously want to also destroy you. Destroy your reputation. They may want to destroy your relationships. They may want to sabotage your class grades. They may want to sabotage your fellowships. Whatever that is, that they have a malicious intent, maybe because they're jealous of you, maybe because you are able to achieve things that they can't. And these folks, happen in our lives, and we also need to know how to draw boundaries around these folks. But my advice to students is, especially at this time in your career and in your growth, is seek out those adders and those multipliers. I literally have a list of people in my life that I consider as multipliers, and I reach out to them and I make sure they know what I'm up to. Even now as a professional, right? I'm like, hey, these are the people that really, really have my back, and behind closed doors, they're going to advocate for me. And when there's job openings, or when there are opportunities or conferences or fellowships or Fulbrights, right, that they're going to be the people who are going to nominate me and say, this is the best person for this role, because I have seen them develop over time. So that would be my advice.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I actually wanted to ask, what was the name of the book by chance? Because I'm very interested.
Let me look it up and I'll
Yes.
send it to y'all.
Okay.
'Cause, yeah, it's a cute little small book.
Mhm.
You can read it within an hour. And
Oh, wow.
it's so transformative.
Quick follow-up question to that. Or would you recommend when looking for people who are going to be your adders, your multipliers?
Yeah. Honest, genuine relationship skills. I think people can sense when somebody is just a transactional person. They're like, hey, can I just talk to you about this one thing because that's the only thing that I need for this transaction? But I think when you approach somebody at a very honest and genuine way, people can feel that. People can sense oh, this is somebody who's genuinely struggling or interested, or is motivated by wanting to learn more. But I think once you also build those relationships, right, maintaining that is important. And so one advice or strategy that I do is at the end of every year, I'm going to do this, December 31st, 2023 as well. I write an email to all of my multipliers, and I just give them a life update. Hey, this year, these are all the things I've been up to, right? I started my photography website. I ran these half marathons throughout the city. I, learned a new language, whatever it is, just to keep them updated. And so I have a list in their emails, or if I want to text them, to just say, hey, this is what I've been up to. How are you? How have you been? How has your year been? And genuinely being interested in like hearing what they have to say. Sometimes they have nothing to say. Sometimes they're like, wow, amazing, great. But then at least now they know, oh, he has been running these half marathons. Let me, like now I can keep record of that. And, or, oh, she started a new photography website. If I need anybody, or if there's a reference, I could say, hey, I know somebody who does this, right? So that they're inundated with my life and they know what's going on, because we're so busy all the time. And sometimes when you lose connection with those mentors and those adders and multipliers, one of the things that kills that is a disconnection, right? So I think staying connected, whether or not that is an end of year email that you send out, or a regular newsletter that you, or just a check-in every once in a while with your multipliers. You just be like, hey, can we have dinner? And I just want to update you on what's happening, even if I don't have any conflict in my life, like, and then genuinely asking them, how are you doing? Because those relationships over time, it translates into, them saying good things about you behind closed doors. And here's one of the things I learned about the hiring process behind the scene. I think as a FGLI student, we don't know what social capital or social networks are, right? Or we understand it, I understood it at a very theoretical level, but then in the workforce, I saw it play out in real time, and I'm like, oh, this is what they mean when they talk about people saying good things about you behind closed doors. So I remember I was sitting on a hiring committee, and we were hiring for a role, and in the role, we had over 100 applicants for this role. We could, really just narrow it down to like the top 10. And one of the students, or one of the people in that pool, knew somebody within that school. And she automatically got put into the pool of the top 10. And I'm like, I looked at her resume and I looked at all the other 100 ones, and I'm like, there are way more qualified candidates in the pool. Like, why is she automatically put in just because she knew somebody? But that's really how it works, is when you know somebody from the inside and you have a reference point from the inside, you get, out of courtesy and out of, the connection that you have, she automatically got an interview. She wasn't our final candidate, like she didn't make it to the final round, but that's when I realized, wow, so it really does matter who you know behind closed doors. And they say, let's move this person up in the ladder of our application pool. And so that's why it's so important to me to, as a FGLI person, to also tell other students, it really, people say it's not about what you know, it's who you know. To a lot of degree, that is true, because behind closed doors, those are the people who are going to say, let's move this resume up, or let's, I'm going to vouch for this person, or this person has the character or the cultural fit for our institution in a way that you, as a FGLI student, could be the most amazing person. But if you don't have those social connections, it's not impossible to get in, but more doors are going to be harder to open.
Oh, yeah. I feel like that's one of the things it took me a while to understand while here at Penn, because the pre-professional culture here is very prominent, and it's okay, because the way I found out about it was through like humor, I guess, because people make joke and be like, oh, how many LinkedIn connections do you have? Oh, who do you know? Or are you like going to coffee chats? And so I kind of felt secluded from that this side of Penn for a while. I actually didn't really branch out of my own little bubble until this year, which I'm very glad I did, and I got to meet some pretty cool people. Did you have to deal with any of that type of pre-professional culture in any of the institutions, and how you went about including yourself in those conversations?
Yeah. The pre-professional culture at Penn is real. Penn face is real. And I think like imposter syndrome is real. And so all of those combine, I congratulate all of the Penn undergraduate students for surviving a place like this. Because as a graduate student who went here and observed the undergrad students, I'm like, I don't even think I would have survived Penn undergrad. It's very pre-professional. It's a very one vision tunnel of like, this is the right way to do it, and if you don't do it this way, good luck, you're off the beaten road. So I commend all the Penn students who are undergraduate students and are navigating this. I think for me, I've also navigated through, spaces where I'm like, okay, I don't fit into that mold, right? And I think for me, it was very clear when I went to Connecticut. Right after Penn, I got a full-time job at Wesleyan University in Connecticut. And so I was there for 3.5 years, and I felt the imposter syndrome very deeply for the first time. Because I was like, I'm not rich enough to be here. There's all these affluent and like very wealthy people who go to school here. I'm not white enough to be here. I don't eat enough cheese or know enough about my wines to like understand the culture here or to like socialize in spaces where they're like, oh, which type of wine do you want? I'm like, I don't know, that one. Or, students, I would advise a lot of students on like the study abroad experience, and they would be like, why do I need to do this? Why do I need to know this? I literally grew up going to Italy and Mexico every summer. I don't need to understand cultural competency. And so then I have had to shift and say, well, let's understand cultural humility instead, because a lot of the skill sets that as a first gen student that I had and that I had to navigate when I was abroad were things that they're like, yeah, no, I don't have to navigate those things. I'm not a person of color. I don't have to, I don't have immigrant parents. And I grew up traveling every summer, every break. We go to, Europe every summer. So for the first time, I felt like, wow, what do I have to offer? But I think one of the things I've learned about that process of like being excluded, right? Like you said, feeling excluded or not part of the in group is actually finding strength in my own ways or in my own identity. And I realized one of my biggest strengths is that I have so much relational skills, like relationship building skills, and that I was really creative and I knew how to bring people together. And I found that in a lot of these spaces, like it was very individualistic and it was very like me. And that became so hyper competitive that it was, to me, it felt like it was counterproductive to what the world that I wanted to build and the world that I wanted to be a part of. So I realized, hey, I just needed to bring people together, whether or not that's over meals or over a hiking trip or over a trip to, somewhere, or just over learning about something together as a group. And really leveraging on my own skill sets that was seen as like a deficit and not a bringing of people, or in the individualistic world didn't seem as like a strength. And I remember I sat down with one of my directors at the time for an annual performance review, right? And this was where the imposter syndrome also came in, was like during these performance reviews, one of the things that they said to me was, Kia, you're an assistant director. You don't need to move the tables and chairs during our big campus events. That is a role for our administrative assistant. Right? And so that's not in your job description. That's not in your duties. And like, basically you're not doing your job. And I remember I went home and I had this, like, all this knot in my tummy. Cause I'm like, wow, I thought I was being a team builder. I thought I was being collaborative. I thought it was all hands on deck. And yet the response was, Kia, that's not your job. That's, stay in your lane. And I went home and I felt really bad about it because I'm like, oh man, like, did I do something wrong? Like, why do I suck at my job? And then I thought about it some more and I'm like, no, these are my values. These are things that like at home, I've been taught that these are actually important life skills to have, is to be a team builder, right? Like our administrative assistant should not be the only person who's moving all the tables and chairs. That's a lot of work on just one person. And so, yes, I, am not an administrative assistant, but I am there and I'm a part of the team. And instead of me being, slapped on the hand for not helping out, I should have been rewarded for being a team player and for being, somebody who is thinking collaboratively about the work that we do at the center. But I remembered like those that conversation left me with a really sour taste, and me having to go home and sit with myself and say, like, these are my strengths. Like, this is what I bring to the team and to the table, and this is a skill set that is not valued here. I need to go find somewhere else where it's valued, and where I'm going to get a promotion because I'm a team builder, not I'm going to get demoted because I want to be a team builder, or that I'm thinking collectively about the success of everybody. I'm not just thinking about me and my lane, and that if I do well, then I get the promotion. So I think it's a lot of like countering recognizing that our strength as FGLI folks who come from minority backgrounds or maybe cultures that are a little more collectivistic or a little more like the values are around building community, finding spaces for me that value that kind of skill set has been instrumental in, one, my mental health, but also two, in building allies across the institution, and allies around the work that I do. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that was a really, really good experience to hear and learn about. I guess final wrapping up question. Do you have any resources, anyone, anything you want to quickly shout out before we end?
Yeah, I mean, I work here at the Greenfield Intercultural Center. So one of the resources I would offer is come here, right? We are literally a home away from home for students on campus. We're literally a house on campus at 3708 Chestnut. We are one of the few places on campus where if you are go nonstop, you get to slow down because it really just feels like, okay, I could kind of breathe. And I know that Penn is a space where students run at 100 miles per hour. You are doing everything all the time, every time. And sometimes you just need a place where you feel nourished, where you feel supported, you feel seen. And here at the GIC, we are a resource for students to literally just come in and slow down and pause and think about, why am I running 100 miles per hour? Like, what is this all for? And why am I in college? Why am I here so far away from home? We're a place where you can reflect on that and think a little deeper about just like, okay, my exam is next week and I need to finish the exam, but it's like, what's this exam for? And how do I connect this to the larger narrative of my life, to my family, to my friends, to my professional development? So just know that this is a space for students, and I'm here. I'm FGLI. I understand the experience. There are things that students come here, they don't have to say a lot. And I'm like, I get it. You don't have to explain yourself. You can just be you, and let's strategize. Let's connect you to those multipliers. Why we have a platform called Penn Flash Presents. That's another resource to help FGLI students. Penn Flash came out of an initiative around FGLI students here at the GIC. Literally, it is all the students who have come through the GIC who have now graduated and want to support students that are going through it right now in real time. So they're students like you. And they've graduated, they're probably 2, 3, 5, 10 years out, and they've kind of figured out their FGLI experience. They're people like me, right, who are now at the institution supporting students through this process. So know that Penn Flash is also a resource. It's free as long as you have Penn key and password. You can log in. Look for people who are in the same field as you. And so as I'm talking about like building your social capital, you know, Penn Flash is a very easy way to tap into. To me, I think about Penn Flash as like LinkedIn combining with the dating app, right? Like that, both of them coming together. So on LinkedIn, when you reach out to people, it's just kind of like a void, right? You hope that they'll respond. On Penn Flash, we have an 80% response rate from alumni to students. This is how much the alums care about our student population. They respond and they're like, hey, what do you need help on? And it's one of those places where you don't have to be polished to get help or to ask for help or to reach out. You don't have to have a whole spiel and say like, hey, I'm doing XYZ. I want to build, this spaceship, and can you connect me to people? It's literally students reaching out and saying like, hey, I don't know what I want to do, but can I just listen to you? And can you just tell me your story? Or, hey, I have a vague idea of what I want to do. I want to be in tech, but what are the possibilities in tech? Or I want to do finance. What are the possibilities? Because this is the one way that Penn is telling me that I have to behave in order to like succeed in life. How did you navigate your life? So Penn Flash is one of the resources here that could also help students. But just know that here at the GIC, we are literally here to support you through your experience.
I've also been to the GIC since, I want to say freshman year. Oh yeah, like everything you said, very, very welcoming space, and always happy to stop by when I can. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Penn Flash is also really awesome too. I've met like a lot of really cool, really helpful people. Those multipliers that you've talked about, I've met pretty much all of them through Penn Flash, which is really cool.
Awesome.
Yeah. But thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you.
Kia. For those of you who are listening, you can check out more of our episodes on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts, as well as our Instagram at FGLI Podcast. And we'll see you guys next time.